The massive space station called Concordia Prime floated in the darkness between stars. Inside its gleaming halls, 12 different alien species had gathered for an emergency meeting. The air buzzed with tension as creatures of all shapes and sizes took their seats around the circular chamber. At the center of the room stood Veltar, a tall being with silver skin and glowing blue eyes. As the Speaker of the Galactic Council, his word carried enormous weight. Today, that word would change the fate of an entire species. "We are here to discuss the human problem," Veltar announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. "The evidence is clear. Humanity has become too dangerous to remain in civilized space." Ambassador Chen sat in the human section, her hands clenched into fists. She had served as Earth's voice to the galaxy for 15 years. Now she watched as everything she had worked for crumbled around her. The Zephyrian representative, a bird-like creature with rainbow feathers, spoke first. "They stole our quantum drive technology. What should have taken them centuries to understand, they mastered in months. This is not normal behavior." "Normal?" Chen stood up, her voice sharp. "We learned from you because we wanted to be part of this community. Is that a crime?" A reptilian delegate from the Saurian Empire hissed softly. "They turned our peaceful mining equipment into weapons. The battle at Proxima showed us their true nature. They fight like wild animals." "We defended ourselves when attacked," Chen replied. "Any species would do the same." But the worst accusation came from the ethereal hierarchy representative, a being of pure energy contained in a crystal shell. "They have been asking questions about the restricted zones. These areas are forbidden for good reasons that primitives cannot understand." The chamber fell silent. The restricted zones were a topic that made even the oldest species uncomfortable. These areas of space were marked as off-limits to all galactic travel, guarded by automated defense systems that would destroy any ship that came too close. Veltar raised his hand for silence. "The evidence speaks for itself. Humans are too aggressive, too curious, and too unpredictable. They threaten the stability of our peaceful galaxy." "You call it peaceful," Chen said, standing again. "But you've hidden things from us since the day we made first contact. What are you so afraid of in those restricted zones? What don't you want us to find?" The question hung in the air like a physical weight. Several representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The architects, mysterious beings who rarely spoke, watched from their section with unreadable expressions. "This is exactly what we mean," Veltar continued. "Humans ask dangerous questions. They push boundaries that should not be pushed. They take risks that endanger everyone." The debate continued for hours. Species after species spoke against humanity. They talked about human stubbornness, their refusal to follow established protocols, their tendency to improvise solutions that defied conventional wisdom. "They modify our technology without permission," complained the mechanical synthetics. "They create hybrid designs that should not work, yet somehow do. They form emotional bonds too easily," added the logical cerebral union. "This leads to irrational decision-making that puts entire missions at risk." Chen listened to each accusation with growing anger. Everything they criticized was exactly what made humans special. Yes, they were curious. Yes, they took risks. Yes, they formed bonds with other species. These were good things, not crimes. When the formal accusations ended, Veltar called for the vote. "All in favor of expelling humanity from Council space?" One by one, the representatives cast their votes. The Zephyrians voted yes. The Saurian Empire voted yes. The ethereal hierarchy voted yes. The pattern continued around the chamber. Only the architects remained silent when their turn came. Their representative, a being of living crystal, finally spoke. "We abstain from this vote." "Abstention noted," Veltar said coldly. "The motion passes. Humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Council. All human colonies in Council space must be evacuated within 1 galactic standard year. Earth is to be quarantined indefinitely. Chen felt the words hit her like physical blows. Decades of diplomacy, of trying to prove humanity belonged among the stars, destroyed in a single moment. "You're making a terrible mistake," she said, her voice steady despite her anger. "You think you're protecting the galaxy from us. But someday you'll face a threat that your careful, civilized ways can't handle. When that day comes, you'll remember what you've done here. Human ships will be escorted to the edge of known space," Veltar continued, ignoring her words. "Any human vessel found in Council territory after the deadline will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly." As the session ended, representatives began filing out of the chamber. Some avoided looking at Chen, while others stared at her with mixtures of pity and satisfaction. The architect representative approached Chen as she gathered her belongings. Up close, the crystalline being seemed to pulse with inner light. "Your people are not the first to be judged too dangerous by this council," the architect said quietly, "but they may be the first to survive what comes next." "What do you mean?" Chen asked. "The restricted zones exist for a reason, Ambassador Chen. The council believes they have contained the threats within them. They are wrong. When those threats break free, your people's so-called flaws may prove to be strengths." Before Chen could ask more questions, the architect glided away, leaving her alone in the empty chamber. Days later, human ships began their exodus from Council space. Millions of humans abandoned their homes on distant worlds, loading whatever they could carry onto vessels of all sizes. The sight of the refugee fleet would have moved any compassionate heart, but the Council had made their decision. As Earth's final diplomatic ship crossed the boundary into unexplored space, Chen sent one last message to the galaxy she was leaving behind. "You've taught us something today," she broadcast on all frequencies. "You've shown us that we can't rely on anyone but ourselves. We'll remember that lesson, and when the darkness comes for you, as it always does, we'll remember how you cast us out into that same darkness and expected us to die." The message ended, and humanity began their journey into the unknown, carrying with them the anger and determination that would reshape the galaxy. 50 years had passed since the Great Expulsion, and the galaxy beyond Council space buzzed with human activity. What the Council had expected to be humanity's death sentence had instead become their rebirth. Commander Marcus Torres stood on the bridge of the Defiant Spirit, watching the stars through the viewport. His ship was ugly by Council standards. Where alien vessels were sleek and elegant, his ship looked like it had been built in a scrapyard. Sections of Zephyrian hull plating were welded next to Saurian power cores, all held together with human engineering and pure stubbornness. "Commander!" called out Lieutenant Sarah Kim from her station. "We're picking up a distress signal from the Kepler system." Torres turned from the viewport. The Kepler system was one of humanity's newest colonies, located dangerously close to what the Council called the restricted zones. "What's the situation?" "Unknown ships attacking the mining station. The colonists are requesting immediate assistance." "Set course for Kepler. Maximum speed." Torres settled into his command chair. "And send word to the fleet. We might need backup." As the Defiant Spirit jumped to faster-than-light travel, Torres reflected on how much had changed. When the Council expelled humanity, they had expected humans to quietly disappear into the void. Instead, humanity had done what they always did when backed into a corner. They adapted. Cut off from Council trade routes, humans learned to build everything themselves. They salvaged alien technology from derelict ships found drifting in space. They reverse-engineered captured equipment. Most importantly, they learned to make do with less. Human ships no longer needed the exotic materials that Council vessels required. Instead, they used ordinary metals and ceramics, powered by fusion reactors that could be built in any decent machine shop. They were crude compared to Council technology, but they worked. and they could be repaired anywhere. The journey to Kepler took 6 hours. When they arrived, Torres immediately saw the problem. 3 large ships were attacking the mining station. Their sleek black hulls, unlike anything in the Council database. "Those aren't Council ships," Kim reported. "The design is completely unknown." "Scan them," Torres ordered. "I want to know what we're dealing with." The scanning results made Torres frown. The ships seemed to be made of organic material rather than metal. Worse, they were feeding on the station's power generators, somehow draining energy directly from the reactors. "Sir," Kim said, her voice tight with worry. "The mining station just went dark. All power is down." Through the viewport, Torres watched as the mysterious ships moved toward the colony ships trying to evacuate the system. Whatever these things were, they were killing everything they touched. "Battle stations," Torres announced. "All hands to combat positions." The Defiant Spirit moved to intercept the unknown vessels. As they got closer, Torres could see that the ships weren't just organic-looking. They were actually alive, covered in what looked like black scales that shifted and moved in the vacuum of space. "Sir, they're scanning us," Kim reported. "Whatever they are, they know we're here now." The largest of the 3 ships turned toward them. Torres could see openings along its hull that might have been weapons ports, or they might have been mouths. "Fire everything we have," Torres ordered. The Defiant Spirit's weapons opened fire. Energy beams struck the alien vessel, but instead of damaging it, the creature seemed to absorb the energy. The black scales along its hull glowed brighter as it fed on their attack. "Energy weapons are useless," Kim announced. "It's actually getting stronger." Torres smiled grimly. This was exactly the kind of problem humans were good at solving. "Switch to kinetic rounds. Load the railguns with solid shot." "Sir, kinetic weapons are considered primitive by Council standards." "Good thing we're not the Council anymore." The railguns fired, sending solid metal projectiles at incredible speed toward the alien ship. The rounds punched through the creature's hull, tearing great holes in its organic structure. Dark fluid leaked into space as the thing writhed in obvious pain. "It's working," Kim said with surprise. "The kinetic rounds are actually hurting it." "These things evolved to fight the Council," Torres realized. "They adapted to drain energy weapons. But they've never encountered good old-fashioned bullets." The alien ship tried to retreat, but Torres wasn't about to let it escape. "Ramming speed. Prepare for collision." "Sir?" Kim looked at him with wide eyes. "You heard me. We're going to ram that thing." The Defiant Spirit accelerated toward the wounded alien vessel. At the last second, Torres fired the emergency boosters, sending his ship crashing into the creature's side. The impact tore both vessels apart, but the alien ship died while the human crew survived in their armored escape pods. The other 2 alien ships, seeing their companion destroyed, fled back toward the restricted zone they had come from. As rescue ships arrived to collect the survivors, Torres found himself thinking about what they had just encountered. These creatures were clearly from the restricted zones, the areas the Council had forbidden anyone to enter, and they were designed to fight Council technology. 3 days later, Torres received an encrypted message that changed everything. The sender identified herself as Dr. Lisa Chen, daughter of the former human ambassador to the Council. The message was brief, but shocking. "Commander Torres, my name is Lisa Chen. I'm currently working as a xenobiologist in Council space, studying the creatures you just encountered. They're called Devourers, and they're breaking out of the restricted zones. The Council has been hiding their existence for thousands of years, but containment is failing. 17 Council worlds have already gone dark. The energy-dependent civilizations of the galaxy cannot fight these things. But you just proved that humans can. We need to talk." Torres stared at the message for a long time. The Council had expelled humanity to protect their precious civilization. Now it seemed that same civilization was under threat from something they had been hiding all along. He composed a reply to Dr. Chen, then sent copies to every human colony and ship in known space. If the Council was facing extinction from their own secrets, humanity needed to be ready. But as he watched the stars through his viewport, Torres couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy was about to change forever. The creatures they had just fought were only the beginning. Something bigger was coming, something that would test every species in the galaxy, and for the first time since the expulsion, Torres smiled. Humanity had spent 50 years learning to survive in the dark. Now it seemed like the rest of the galaxy was about to join them there. The Council had cast humanity out for being too dangerous. Soon they might discover that dangerous was exactly what the galaxy needed. The Council chamber on Concordia Prime had never seen such chaos. Speaker Veltar stood before a room filled with panicking representatives from across the galaxy. The orderly civilization he had worked to protect was crumbling before his eyes. 15 more systems have gone dark, reported the Zephyrian delegate, her rainbow feathers dim with stress. The Devourers are spreading faster than our models predicted. Our energy shields cannot stop them. Veltar closed his eyes and tried to maintain his composure. The creatures from the restricted zones had broken free 3 months ago. Every weapon the Council possessed had proven useless against them. The Devourers absorbed energy from any source, growing stronger with each attack. "What about evacuation efforts?" Veltar asked. "Failing," replied the Saurian representative, his scales a sickly green color. "The Devourers move faster than our ships. They're hunting down refugee fleets and feeding on their power cores." Across the galaxy, the greatest civilizations ever known were being consumed by creatures they had thought safely contained. Worlds that had existed in peace for thousands of years were now empty husks, their populations devoured and their energy drained completely. Meanwhile, in the Outer Rim territories, humanity watched the destruction with mixed feelings. Some humans felt pity for their former oppressors. Others saw it as justice for their expulsion. The debate raged across human settlements. "We should help them," argued Colony Administrator Jennifer Walsh during a meeting on New Terra. "They may have wronged us, but watching entire species die isn't the answer." "Why?" countered General Harrison, leader of the human military forces. "They threw us out like garbage. Let them solve their own problems." The argument might have continued forever, but then the Devourers found their first human target. Commander Torres was leading a patrol near the Tau Ceti system when the attack came. 3 Devourer ships, larger than the ones they had fought before, emerged from hyperspace and immediately began hunting human vessels. "All ships, this is Torres," he broadcast to his small fleet. "We've got company. Same type of creatures we fought at Kepler, but bigger." Captain Maria Santos in the Resilient Dawn responded immediately. "Orders, Commander?" "Same as last time. Kinetic weapons only. These things eat energy, so we feed them metal instead." The battle was fierce. The Devourers had learned from their previous encounter and tried to stay at long range, but human ships were built for close combat, designed by a species that understood that sometimes you had to get your hands dirty to win. Torres ordered his ship forward, ignoring the creature's attempts to drain their power. "All power to engines. Prepare for ramming speed." "Sir," called his weapons officer, "we could try the new warheads, the nuclear ones." Torres paused. Human engineers had been working on new weapons. Taking advantage of their exile to develop technology, the Council would have considered barbaric. Nuclear warheads that created massive explosions without relying on exotic energy. "Do it," he ordered. "Fire everything we have." The nuclear missiles struck the lead Devourer, tearing massive holes in its organic hull. The creature writhed in agony as radiation flooded its system. These parasites had evolved to feed on clean energy, but they had no defense against the dirty, primitive power of atomic weapons. "It's working," Santos reported. The radiation is poisoning them. The battle that followed became legend among human forces. Ship after ship rammed into the wounded devourers, their crews manually triggering explosions even as life support failed. When Captain Santos's ship lost power, she ordered her crew to aim their vessel directly at the largest devourer and activated their self-destruct sequence. The explosion lit up space for light years in every direction. When the smoke cleared, all 3 devourer ships were dead, floating as dark husks in space. But the human fleet had paid a terrible price. Half their ships were destroyed, and hundreds of brave men and women had given their lives. News of the victory spread across both human and council space like wildfire. The impossible had happened. Someone had defeated the devourers in direct combat. On Concordia Prime, the council meeting erupted in shocked voices as the report reached them. "How is this possible?" demanded the ethereal hierarchy representative. "Our greatest scientists said the devourers could not be stopped." The architect representative, who had remained silent through most of the crisis, finally spoke. "Because your scientists think like civilized beings. Humans think like survivors." Speaker Veltar felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Fear. Not fear of the devourers, but fear of being wrong. If humans could defeat these creatures, then perhaps the Council had made a terrible mistake 50 years ago. Dr. Lisa Chen, still working in secret within Council space, sent out a broadcast that reached every inhabited world in the galaxy. Her message was simple, but devastating. The Council has debated for months while worlds burn. The Devourers adapt to every energy weapon we possess, but they have never encountered projectile weapons. They have never faced nuclear radiation. They have never met an enemy that treats suicide attacks as a valid tactic. She paused, her image flickering on screens across Council space. You called humanity too dangerous for civilization. But right now, 37 Council worlds are empty because your civilization wasn't dangerous enough. The Devourers understand only one language, violence, and humans speak that language fluently. The broadcast continued with tactical information about human weapons and strategies. Chen was risking her life by sharing this information, but she no longer cared about Council law. Humanity spent 50 years learning to survive in the dark places between stars. We learned to fight with whatever we could find. We learned that sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to be willing to destroy yourself in the process. In the council chamber, Veltar watched the broadcast with growing horror, not at what Chen was saying, but at what it meant. The council had expelled humanity for their aggressive nature, their willingness to take risks, their refusal to follow established protocols. Those same qualities were now the galaxy's only hope for survival. As reports came in of more human victories against the Devourers, Veltar realized the truth that would haunt him forever. The Council hadn't expelled humanity to protect civilization. They had expelled them because humanity reminded them of what they had lost in their pursuit of perfection: the willingness to fight, the courage to sacrifice, the stubborn refusal to give up even when facing impossible odds. Now, as their perfect civilization crumbled around them, those barbaric human traits were the only thing standing between the galaxy and complete annihilation. Speaker Veltar stood alone on the observation deck of Concordia Prime, watching as another refugee fleet limped into the station's docking bays. These survivors came from the Altair system, the latest world to fall to the Devourer advance. Of the 3 billion beings who had lived there just weeks ago, fewer than 50,000 had escaped. The proud civilizations of the galaxy were dying. 47 star systems had been completely consumed, their populations devoured, and their worlds left as empty shells. The Devourers were not just killing people. They were erasing entire cultures from existence. Behind him, the Emergency Council session continued its desperate debate. The same representatives who had once voted to expel humanity now faced their own extinction. Their energy weapons were useless. Their shields could not hold. Their perfectly ordered society was collapsing under an assault they could not comprehend. "We must consider all options," the Zephyrian delegate was saying, her voice breaking with exhaustion. "Even the unthinkable ones." Veltar knew what she meant. For days, a few brave voices had suggested the impossible. Contact humanity. Ask for help from the species they had cast out in disgrace. "You cannot be serious," hissed the Saurian representative. "They are savages, primitives. What could they possibly offer that our advanced technology cannot provide?" "They can win," said a new voice. Everyone turned to look at the architect representative. The crystalline being had remained silent through most of the crisis, speaking only when directly asked. Now it stood at the center of the chamber, its form pulsing with inner light. "For 50 years, you have ignored the reports from the Rim territories, human colonies thriving where council species would have died. Human ships exploring regions we declared too dangerous to enter. Human technology that works because it was built by beings who understand that perfection is the enemy of survival." The chamber fell silent. The architects were the oldest species in the galaxy, present since the Council's founding thousands of years ago. When they spoke, others listened. "We opposed the expulsion of humanity," the architect continued, "not because we loved them, but because we recognized something in them that we had lost. The willingness to be crude, to be ugly, to sacrifice elegance for effectiveness." "They defeated the Devourers," whispered the ethereal hierarchy representative. "Multiple times." "Yes," the architect said, "because they understand something we have forgotten. Sometimes the only way to preserve life is to be willing to lose it. Sometimes the only way to protect beauty is to become ugly." Veltar closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his decision. Everything he had built, everything he believed about civilized society, was being destroyed by his own pride. "What are you proposing?" he asked quietly. "Send a delegation to human space," the architect replied. "Ask for their help." The debate that followed was the most bitter in Council history. Ancient prejudices surfaced as species that had cooperated for millennia turned on each other. Some preferred extinction to admitting they had been wrong about humanity. But as more reports came in, as more worlds fell silent, even the proudest voices began to waver. The Devourers were not slowing down. If anything, they were accelerating, growing stronger with each world they consumed. Finally, the vote was called. By the narrowest margin in Council history, the decision was made. They would contact humanity. The message was simple, but it required Veltar to swallow 50 years of pride. As Speaker of the Council, the task fell to him personally. 3 days later, Veltar's ship crossed into human space for the first time since the expulsion. He had expected to find a handful of struggling colonies, barely surviving in the outer darkness. Instead, he found something that shook him to his core. Human space was thriving. Dozens of colonies, hundreds of ships, massive orbital stations that rivaled anything the Council had built. But these structures were different. Where Council architecture was elegant and flowing, human buildings were blocky and practical. They looked like they had been designed by engineers rather than artists. They looked like they were built to last. Veltar's ship was intercepted by a human patrol fleet. The vessels were as ugly as the reports had suggested, but they moved with lethal precision. These were not the desperate refugees who had been expelled 50 years ago. These were warriors who had been forged in the darkness between stars. The human commander who contacted him was Admiral Sarah Kim, daughter of one of the officers who had witnessed the first Devourer attack. She listened to Veltar's prepared speech without interruption, her face showing no emotion. "You want our help," she said when he finished. "After 50 years of exile, you want us to save the galaxy that threw us away." "Yes," Veltar said simply. There was no point in trying to justify what had been done. The Council was wrong. I was wrong. We acknowledge our error and formally request aid against the Devourer threat. Kim studied him for a long moment. And what makes you think we'll help? Why should we save people who considered us too dangerous to live among them? Veltar had prepared for this question, but now that it came, he found himself giving an answer he had not planned. Because you are better than we are, he said quietly. Because despite everything we did to you, you are still human. And humans do not let innocent people die if they can help it. Kim's expression softened slightly. You'll need to speak to our representatives, but I'll warn you now. If we help, things will change. The galaxy won't go back to the way it was before. We won't let ourselves be cast out again. What are your terms? Veltar asked. Full readmission to the galactic community, representation on the Council proportional to our population and territory, and a guarantee that no species can ever be expelled for being different. The terms were reasonable, but Veltar knew they represented something larger. Humanity was not asking to rejoin the Council as it existed. They were demanding the right to help reshape it. I will present your terms to the Council, he said. Do more than that, Kim replied. Make them understand that this is not a negotiation between equals. This is us offering to save you despite what you did to us. The only question is whether your pride will let you accept salvation from the species you thought were beneath you. As Veltar's ship returned to Council space, he reflected on what he had seen. Humanity had not just survived their exile. They had thrived. They had become something new, something stronger than what they had been before. And now, as the galaxy burned around them, those cast-out humans were the only hope for survival. The Council would accept their terms. They had no choice. But Veltar suspected that even after the immediate crisis passed, the galaxy would never be the same again. Humanity had returned, and this time, they would not be denied their place among the stars. The combined fleet gathered at the edge of the Perseus sector, preparing for what everyone knew would be the final battle. Ships from dozens of species floated together in the darkness, but the formation looked nothing like the elegant Council fleets of old. Admiral Torres stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the Resilient Dawn, watching the mixed armada through his viewport. Council vessels with their smooth, flowing lines were scattered among the angular, brutal-looking human ships. The contrast was striking, but it was working. "Status report," Torres called to his bridge crew. "All fleets report ready," answered Commander Kim, now serving as his chief of staff. "The Council ships are providing sensor coverage and defensive screens. Our ships are loaded with kinetic weapons and nuclear warheads." "And the special cargo?" Kim's expression darkened. "Loaded and ready, sir. Though I still can't believe we're using Devourer corpses as ammunition." Torres nodded grimly. Human engineers had made a disturbing discovery. The exotic matter that made up Devourer bodies was incredibly destructive when properly weaponized. Dead Devourers could be turned into weapons to kill living ones. It was a tactic that horrified the Council races, but humanity had learned to use every tool available. "Intelligence reports the Devourer hive world is directly ahead," Kim continued. "Long-range scans show at least 50 of the creatures defending it." Torres studied the tactical display. The Devourer hive world was where the creatures reproduced and coordinated their attacks. Destroying it would cripple their ability to spread across the galaxy. But it was defended by more Devourers than anyone had ever seen in one place. "Signal the fleet," Torres ordered. "Begin final approach." The combined armada moved forward, human and Council ships working together for the first time in 50 years. The partnership was not easy. Council species preferred long-range combat with energy weapons, while humans favored close quarters fighting with kinetic rounds. But they had learned to complement each other. The first Devourer ships appeared on the scanner, moving to intercept the fleet. These creatures were larger than any they had faced before, their organic hulls pulsing with absorbed energy from conquered worlds. "Council ships, begin energy bombardment," Torres ordered. "Draw their attention and let them feed. Human ships, prepare kinetic assault." The plan was simple but effective. Council ships would fire their energy weapons, allowing the Devourers to absorb the power and become overconfident. Then human ships would strike with solid rounds and nuclear weapons, hitting the creatures while they were distracted. The first phase worked perfectly. Devourer ships rushed toward the Council vessels, eager to feed on their exotic energy. The creatures glowed brighter as they absorbed power from the alien weapons, growing larger and more confident. That was when the human ships struck. Railguns fired solid metal projectiles at incredible speed. Nuclear missiles detonated against organic hulls, flooding the creatures with deadly radiation. Most devastating of all, the weaponized devourer corpses tore through their living cousins like acid through flesh. "Direct hit on the lead creature," reported the weapons officer. "It's breaking apart." "Continue firing," Torres ordered. "Don't give them time to adapt." The battle intensified as more Devourers joined the fight. The creatures quickly learned to avoid the Council ships and focus on the humans, but that was exactly what Torres wanted. Human vessels were built for this kind of punishment. "Hull breach on Deck 7, Kim reported as the ship shook from another impact. "Damage control teams responding." "Keep us in the fight," Torres said calmly. "We're not done yet." The battle raged for hours. Ships from both sides were lost, their crews fighting to the last breath. But slowly, steadily, the combined fleet pushed through the Devourer defenses toward the hive world itself. Captain Santos, commanding a group of assault ships, led the final charge. Her vessels were loaded with the most powerful weapons humanity had developed, nuclear bombs designed to crack planets. "This is Santos to all ships," she broadcast. "Final approach to the hive world. Remember, we only get one chance at this." The hive world was a nightmare of organic architecture, its surface covered in structures that pulsed like living organs. This was where the Devourers had been born, where they planned their conquest of the galaxy. "Target the central nexus," Torres ordered. "All ships, concentrate fire on the core structure." The assault was devastating. Nuclear weapons designed for planetary bombardment struck the hive world's surface, while kinetic rounds punched deep into its organic core. The planet convulsed like a dying animal, its defensive systems failing one by one. But the Devourers had one last surprise. As their world died beneath them, the surviving creatures launched a final desperate attack. They threw themselves at the human ships with suicidal fury, trying to take as many enemies with them as possible. "They're trying to ram us," Kim reported as a wounded Devourer ship accelerated toward their position. "Evasive maneuvers." "Negative," Torres said quietly. "Hold position." "Sir? You heard me. Hold position and prepare for ramming speed." Kim stared at him in shock. Then understanding dawned in her eyes. "All hands, brace for impact. Prepare for collision." The resilient Dawn met the Devourer ship head-on, both vessels disappearing in a massive explosion that lit up the dying hive world below. But even as his flagship died around him, Torres smiled. The mission was complete. The hive world was destroyed, and with it, the Devourer threat to the galaxy. 3 months later, the new Galactic Accord was signed aboard a rebuilt Concordia Prime. The ceremony was simple but historic. For the first time in Council history, humans sat as equal partners at the table of galactic civilization. Admiral Kim, the new human representative, stood to address the assembled delegates. She wore the simple blue uniform of the Terran Coalition, a stark contrast to the elaborate robes of the other species. 50 years ago, you expelled us for being too dangerous, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. You were right. We are dangerous. We fight when others would surrender. We take risks when others would play it safe. We break things when others would preserve them. She paused, looking around the chamber at faces that represented dozens of species. But sometimes the galaxy needs dangerous people. Sometimes the universe presents threats that can only be defeated by those willing to sacrifice everything. Today we establish a new principle for this council. No species will be cast out for being different. No culture will be expelled for refusing to conform. The accord was signed without opposition. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson about the price of exclusion. Years passed, and the new order settled into place. Human ranger fleets patrolled the rim territories, watching for new threats. Other species began adopting human training methods, though few could match humanity's particular combination of creativity and controlled recklessness. The council still governed, but now it governed with the understanding that civilization was not about avoiding danger. It was about facing that danger together, with all the tools and perspectives that different species could provide. Admiral Kim stood in her office, reading reports from the frontier. New species were being discovered, new challenges were arising, new threats were developing in the darkness between stars. She smiled as she composed her daily report to Earth. Another quiet day in the galaxy. 3 new species made contact, 2 ancient artifacts were discovered, and 1 minor space-time anomaly was contained without casualties. The universe remains dangerous, but we remain ready. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the best way to preserve civilization was to embrace a little barbarism. And humanity, cast out for being too dangerous, had become its greatest protectors.